Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up,
Alcaraz downs Medvedev to defend his Indian Wells title.
Swiatek swats away Sakkari for her second triumph.
And Saudi Arabia tables billion-dollar offer for tennis.
Kim, Chris, today is the 18th of March and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. We are halfway through the Sunshine Double, the Sunshine Swing. Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Swiatek are your champions in Indian Wells, and we're going to be diving in to both of the men's and women's draws. We're going to be talking about Saudi Arabia and their offer for tennis. We've got Joel's game also coming back. But guys, I want to start with something that's very close to my heart, and I'm actually not particularly happy with you at the moment because French Open tickets went on sale earlier in the week. You both were in the queue. Where was my invite?
I mean, we probably could have done with someone extra trying to get us tickets, right, Kim?
Well, I joined and it was about 400,000 people ahead of me, which makes the Wimbledon queue seem minute in comparison when you turn up on the morning.
Camping is easier to get a ticket.
Yes, I was thinking, please Wimbledon, never get rid of the grounds pass and the camping queue in the park, because I'd rather do this than sit on my laptop for hours on end, like praying in hope that we'll get something.
I did hear the numbers were absolutely astronomical, weren't they? I'm assuming people think, was it the Rafa effect with Nadal maybe last French Open?
I think so.
I would guess so.
I mean, Kim, is that why you were in the queue?
Yes and no, because I am going in the hope that I'll see Rafa, but with the full expectation that that's probably quite unlikely, given the tickets that we were only able to get in the end. And I don't know if I have full confidence that Rafa's going to be there, if his body's going to hold up. I know he'll do everything he can to be there, but yeah, the chances are, but it's unlikely. I'm kind of just wanting a nice day at the French Open. I haven't been there in about 10 years, so I'm looking forward to seeing all the changes in person. We've got roofs now. We've got new courts, so a lot has changed. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, first time Susan Longlong will have a roof. But Joel, why aren't you going to be attending? That's the question we should ask. It's Andy Murray's final Roland Garros, you told me.
When I first heard the news of just how many people were in the queue for tickets, I didn't actually think it was the Rafa Nadal effect. I thought it was the Andy Murray effect, because it's probably, if he can do it, it's going to be his last Roland Garros as well. But yeah, I don't know. It sort of caught me by surprise. I didn't actually realise that tickets were going on sale during the week. Maybe another year. I mean, I would like to go back there. I've only been to Roland Garros once, and as Kim said, I think there's been a lot of updates and improvements probably since the last time I went. So it would be, I'd love to see how it's come on.
We're going to have to get you back there. This is on the list of many places that I'm going to get you to go to.
I'm not going to lie. I'm now already slightly nervous around how we're going to be doing our round by round coverage.
That's the only reason you're annoyed at us. Because
public Wi-Fi, I can see it now. It's going to be like public Wi-Fi outside Suzanne Longlen.
New York was an interesting one as well, when I almost got hit by a tennis ball on public Wi-Fi. Yeah. Nothing but professional here at Tennis Weekly.
I'm just looking forward to Parisian food as well. Happily record an episode with you guys from a nice
galette for your trouble.
Bistro. A galette. A Hugo. Perhaps there'll be some Hugos in Paris. I hope so. Certainly be checking out the hot chocolate scene. That's for sure. But what's happened this week, aside from French Open tickets going on sale? Because, I mean, I've been enjoying seeing tennis players or ex-tennis players at the Oscars. We had Roger Federer and his wife Mirka in attendance, looking very dapper at the Oscars. I'm enjoying seeing where Federer is these days around the world, like his holidays in Thailand. Now he's at the Oscars. And I also loved the ATP Golden Rackets award ceremony as well, which is kind of, the ATP version of the Oscars. And that's provided some entertainment as well. I think Novak Djokovic picked up an award. Oh, sorry, Bert Critchley, who's his real name. Novak Djokovic is just a character, and also more of him later because his character didn't have a great week in Indian Wells, did he?
No, he did not. But I mean, at least he picked up something off the court, an off-court award, as he prepares to have a little break. So maybe he's going to celebrate the success of his golden racket. One thing I was going to say, kind of touching upon kind of awards season and actors and celebrity, is that my highlight of the week was around Zendaya. She was actually at Indian Wells, and she's obviously starring in a big budget film coming out called Challengers, which is tennis related. It's all about tennis and the drama that happens off court. And she was at Indian Wells meeting Iga Swiatek. And I just thought that was very nice to see that her interest in tennis is either sparked by the film or she was already a tennis fan, which is great. I think she's been spotted at the US Open before. But I did love one Twitter user did say that given the film is called Challengers, why wasn't she at the Phoenix Challenger instead of Indian Wells?
Yeah,
Wow.
she should be on the Challenger Tour, proper tennis.
Yeah, exactly. Not
I forgot
the 1000
that she.
tour.
I forgot she was doing that Challengers film because I thought she was there because of June and it being like in the desert. And
In the
you know,
desert,
June is set
maybe.
in like
They're
a
shooting-
sandy
shooting
landscape.
June
Little
3.
crossover.
Yeah, June 3,
some sort
Indian
of
Wells.
scouting out some film locations, new film locations for the trilogy.
Getting used to the heat. Well, the rain.
Well, my highlight of the week was, I think it's got to be a lot of, fans' highlight of the week because it's something I have never seen before. But bees on a tennis court during the Carlos Alcaraz Alexander Zverev match. This was a very bizarre thing that happened. Just a swarm of bees onto the court. Mohamed Layani, the umpire, said play has stopped due to a bee invasion. And the spider cam, it basically became the bee cam. It was just kind of covered in, it looked like thousands of bees. And it was yeah, I've never seen anything like that before.
It was
I'm waiting for the
unbelievable.
branded honey to come out. Indian Wells honey
Ooh, Indian Wells honey.
in the gift shop.
I love that.
I mean, but then I think that the bees were taking a particular interest in the spider cam and Carlos Alcaraz. And I think Zverev was overheard saying, like, shall we continue? And I was like, I'm not sure I would like to continue if there's a bee invasion on the court. But of course, it was Mohamed Layani. Who else could it have been in the chair? Probably the most dramatic of all umpires, you know, seizing his moment once again, becoming a meme.
It was really strange because there were a few odd, I would say, like stoppages for play because as well as the bee invasion, we had quite a few rain delays as well. And it's not a time of the year that you sort of expect rain in Indian Wells, in the desert.
Well, it's tennis paradise. That you just don't expect it. You think when you log on,
No.
that you're going to be able to watch immediately, get all the coverage uninterrupted. And I had a few people over for the Sinner-Alcaraz match. I said, this is going to be the match of the year. This is big. We watched 2 games, or what was it? Started 3, and then a 3-hour delay, so we called it quits because we're an hour ahead here. So
It was so annoying, wasn't it? Because I honestly think that's one of the challenges with tennis is that it can be unpredictable unless you get something, you know, like a roof. But with Sinner-Alcaraz, you want bums on seats, and it's just a shame when everyone's ready to go, and then it's like, oh, they're not going to come on to court for another 3 hours.
it does affect it as well. Obviously, we'll talk about a bit more that first set and what happened. But I mean, it does interrupt the play, which is not something that we're used to kind of in these tournaments, in these locations. And for big matches, I mean, it does test your nerves. If you were psyched up the first time, how would you do in 3 hours' time? But we're fine, Kim, in Paris. We're both on courts with roofs, so we won't be interrupted.
Thank the Lord. Should there be, if you're at master's level or above, should it be mandated that you must have a roof, perhaps, to get that status?
On one court, I think probably makes sense. Don't you think you could do what Australia do at Adelaide, where it's more of a tarpaulin that kind of gets taken across potentially, or a Hamburg? Because I'm not sure that an indoor environment in the desert makes the most sense. But
Yeah, to me, like a roof in the desert just doesn't sound that doesn't sound like common sense to me. So I'm not sure, but it was just a bit odd that we had all this rain, all these stoppages when it's tennis paradise. You just expect
maybe
it.
they have to change the
be
branding,
just
Joel,
happening.
from tennis paradise to tennis almost paradise.
Yeah.
Tennis surprise.
Tennis paradise with rain.
Yeah,
Tennis
there we go.
paradise
That's the
with
hashtag.
rain. Joel, I thought you worked in
not as good.
advertising. Talking of tennis paradise, I mean, Carlos Alcaraz, despite the bees, despite the rain, he must think it's paradise because he did defend his title. He's retained it for another year, and it's his first title since Wimbledon last year. So it's been a long time coming. He's had quite a lot of difficulties, recent injury scares being one of them. But he overcame Daniil Medvedev again, 7-6, 6-1 to clinch the title. So this is going to bring him a whole boost of confidence, I think, because it's been a while since we've seen him lift the title. And I think going into it, he had quite a few doubts with the ankle especially. But what did you make of him across the course of the week? You know, he's really found his form. And, I mean, going into that Sinner semi-final, you know, it was earmarked as the big match. Like, Chris, you had people over, you were having a party. I thought Sinner was going to get it. You know, he was on this massive win streak. I just thought it's Sinner's, but Alcaraz has proved me wrong, and maybe a number of our listeners. What was it that he's been able to draw upon this week to kind of elevate his game back up to where it used to be, where it should be?
I would say it's the confidence side of things. I think I'll have to definitely eat my words where I said I wasn't fully convinced, you know, after the injury he had in Rio, that he would be finishing top 10 this year. And kind of, it was very unexpected. And then he obviously plays the sort of tennis that we were expected him to play following that Wimbledon win. And it all just makes sense again. So I think it's all about confidence. And he did kind of speak about the fact that, you know, when you do have that sort of loss of belief, and you do have kind of those struggles, always believing that you can do it and that you can do anything. And I think it just speaks kind of volumes to the fact that after the French Open, where he obviously suffered that very unfortunate semi-final loss, and it was the nerves and his body was kind of reacting to that, and then coming back and winning the biggest title in the sport in Wimbledon, it just shows he's got this incredible sort of bounce back ability. And I mean, his game was completely different to how it's been so far this year. He was playing so aggressively in a way that I haven't seen him return serve like that on a slow court as well. So every aspect of his game, it felt like he improved, and it feels like we've got Alcaraz back. And I think the sport really needed him, because it's not fun watching someone with that much talent struggle to get the wins on the tour.
Yeah, and in the final, especially against Medvedev, Joel, what was it that you thought, you know, gave Alcaraz the edge? It's the second year in a row that he's got the better of Medvedev at this event. Last year, it was also straight sets, and you know, Alcaraz has got a leading head-to-head in their rivalry now. But what was it that kind of really made the difference in the final itself?
I think just looking at Medvedev and his numbers on serve, I think when he's had success with Alcaraz, it's been based on that bedrock of getting a lot of first serves in and putting pressure on Alcaraz and his service games. And I didn't feel like those numbers were particularly high in the final, and it gave Alcaraz that platform to kind of weave into the Medvedev service games and apply that sort of pressure. I also think as well, he was playing, like, there was some excellent shot making from him, as we come to expect, but also at the same time, I thought, compared to what we saw on the Golden Swing, I thought he was playing with percentages a bit more, and he wasn't rushing to make the ridiculous winner early on in the point. He was constructing the point a lot better, I think, and a lot more clearly and a lot more tactically than I think we saw in the Golden Swing, where I just felt like sometimes he was going too big too early and he was creating these kind of really big unforced errors. Whereas here, I felt like he was playing a little bit within himself, particularly in that final, and just waiting to pull the trigger at the right moment. So I think he was picking his moments a lot better. And again, I think that comes down to kind of confidence, feeling his way into the tournament. And a stat I quite liked was, I didn't realise this, but the players he defeated this week, Auger-Aliassime, Marasan, Zverev, Sinner and Medvedev, all players he lost to last year on the tour. So it's not, I think, just a Sinner match, but having faced players who have defeated him recently and taken revenge on them, it's really kind of, I think, set up his season. And I think, this could be a moment where he looks back and be like, this is a turning point, because it has been a scratchy start, but this has been a real bolt from the blue, I think.
I think that will give him, again, another confidence boost, just knowing that you've been able to get the better of players who, did that to you last year. I think that's such a boost, if anything. And it really shows that he's taken on board those losses and is, actively working to make those repairs. And, he beat Sinner, Medvedev this week just gone. And, this is his 5th Masters 1000 title now, his 13th title overall. So, he's still so young, still racking up those numbers. And the way that he came back from that very one-sided first set scoreline against Sinner in the semi-finals, I know we had the rain delay, but I think, coming through that especially, Sinner's very much been the man of the year, looking, supreme so far. So I think that alone will have given him that boost going into the final. Medvedev, though, just a note on him, he seems to be getting to finals, which is great, but losing the vast majority of them of late. A bit of a kind of always the bridesmaid kind of vibe. Chris, do you think, how well has Medvedev kind of rebounded from that very disappointing Australian Open final? But, again, losing in the final here, what does he need to do to kind of stop this kind of rut of final losses going forwards?
I think it will start to have an impact. Obviously last year he played some great tennis. He made the final and lost to Djokovic. The players he's losing to, they really are great players. And they are kind of all from the set of Alcaraz, sort of Alcaraz and Djokovic and Sinner in the big tournaments especially. So, at the moment, it sort of makes you think that he's probably more at number 4 in the world, which I think is where his ranking will be, because of the fact that he isn't getting the wins and the 3 players ranked ahead of him have got slam wins in the last year. So he's always seems to be there in the finals, but he's just not the one who's getting the win. And it was so close in Australia. So you have to think it's really, really disappointing for him that he's not able to get, the big titles that he'd want at this stage. But at the same time, he's putting himself in those situations. He has the opportunity to get these titles. I think rebounding, obviously that first set was very, very tight. It could have gone either way. And I think that probably would have had a big impact on who would have won that match. I'm not saying that Medvedev had got it, he would have won it. But he did have opportunities. He was up at times in that first set. So there is a little bit of a habit of kind of not getting the wins when he is on the front foot sometimes. So I think that's something you have to think about in terms of kind of the temperament, kind of staying in there, hanging in there, and making sure that you do see the match through. But not too much to worry about because he is such a fantastic player. But I do think it is surprising, that one of the only kind of big wins he got last year was on the clay, in Rome. And he's made sort of finals in all the big hardcourt events since.
His record against the top 3, Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, is not particularly great. Do you think he's in like this sort of island on his own? I don't want to say like kind of marooned in this 4th position between like the chasing pack behind him and, these 3 incredible athletes in front of him. But do you feel like is that where we are at the moment? Is he sort of like jettisoned in this sort of no man's land? Or do you still kind of see him as a player who can and should be expecting to defeat these players like more on a regular basis?
I think it's also strange for him because age-wise, he's in the gap between himself and sort of Sinner is 6 years, himself and Alcaraz is 8 years, and then kind of 8 years older than him is Novak Djokovic. So it's almost because of the anomaly that is Novak Djokovic, of his sort of supreme ability to keep playing into like his mid, and then he will be playing into his sort of late 30s. Is something you wouldn't normally sort of expect always. So he is sort of in the middle of those two. And if you think Djokovic had retired at an age when people normally would have previously, or wouldn't be playing some of the best tennis of his career last year, he would have definitely picked up more titles. So it's almost like the younger generation is now coming up, and it's how much he can match them and maybe pick up a title here and there. But I think they are really setting the marker now, those 3.
So what we're saying is Medvedev needs a friend to sit with him in the rankings, so he's not on his island, all on his own. Poor Daniil Medvedev.
Who's going to sit with him? Sit with him. He'd like Rublev to sit with him, that's for sure.
Yeah, they could teach each other how to behave, maybe, or
not
maybe
Holger
not.
Rune.
Maybe they wouldn't be each other's best teacher. And with Sinner, he's lost, the first match for a while now. It's been a good few months. What was it about his performance against Alcaraz, that ultimately meant Alcaraz got the better of him? How did he perform in that match? Did it live up to the hype?
I think that's a good question, because it had amazing moments, but then it wasn't necessarily the closest moments. You know, it went 6-1, 5-1, which is not a very sort of Sinner scoreline that we've seen recently. And so it was almost like if he played at his top level, there was a really good chance he'd get that win. And I think it was the first time we've seen in a match I think that 19-match winning streak or whatever he's on, maybe even more than that, where he hasn't been able to keep that level up. And it reminds me a bit more of some of those matches we've seen previously where he hasn't quite been able to kind of play at the level that we know he can play at, because he did drop his level almost immediately after that sort of first set. And where credit's due, Alcaraz did play some unbelievable tennis. But even when he was trying to get back into it in that third set, and there was a bit of a momentum switch again, he wasn't able to get it done. So I think you can't play perfect tennis all the time, but I was a little bit surprised by the way he sort of went away in those second two sets.
And Joel, where does Sinner go from here then? Because do you think he's going to let this defeat get to him because it's ruined his perfect year, or do we think he's mature enough to obviously just
could help him, right?
Yeah, I think, he's a very level-headed guy. I think he'll go away and think about where he can improve. And yeah, I don't see this really affecting him. I think it's still a bit more on Alcaraz. I think this tournament's shown that Alcaraz is back to his brilliant best. But I think now it's a question of, okay, now I've done that, I need to be more consistent, because that's what's been missing from Alcaraz's game, I feel, over the last 8 months or so, is that consistency. Sinner has had the consistency, and I think he just needs to keep playing the way he's playing, because if he continues to do that, he will pick up trophies. He will put himself in the mix at Grand Slams. So I think, yes, it's a blip. All good things come to an end. We move on.
Talking of Djokovic, who is very much the elder statesman, he, or his character, I should say, did not have a great week. He was knocked out by Luca Nardi, an Italian lucky loser ranked 123 in the world. This is the lowest ranked player to have ever beaten Djokovic at a Masters or Grand Slam level event. Lowest ranked player by just one. The previous record was Kevin Anderson, who was ranked 122 when he did it in 2008, so a very long time ago. This is a very surprising loss. 6-4, 3-6, 6-3. Nardi getting it done, coming across the finish line, closing it out with his sixth ace of the match as well, so closing it out in style. What on earth happened here? Joel, what was the story of this match? As someone who, didn't watch this match, I saw the result and I thought, what on earth has gone on here?
Yeah, I mean, Luca Nardi played a fantastic match. He's not very well known, I think, at the ATP Tour level. He's been a very decent customer on the Challenger circuit, but I think this was only his fifth ATP Tour level win. I think the story was more, though, personally, I think, to do with Djokovic and the way he was playing, because it was just not the Novak Djokovic we know and are accustomed to seeing. His numbers were down. He was spraying errors that I wasn't really expecting. And to me, what was the biggest kind of statistic of the match was how little breakpoint opportunities he was able to manufacture across 3 sets. He had 4 breakpoint opportunities in total. Luca Nardi had 11. It just, I think, shows that, for Djokovic, someone who I know is one of the best returners in the game, he just was not able to make inroads on the Nardi serve like he would expect to. And I think with Djokovic, his mentality, at the moment, I think, he comes into these tournaments and he expects to, he does come in and expect to win, but the tennis is not quite there at the moment. And Kim, we were at that match against Sinner in the Davis Cup finals when he lost in Malaga at the end of last year. And I personally don't think he's recovered, from that loss. He's not playing tennis that is befitting, I think, of his stature. Yes, he has only played 2 tournaments since, at the Australian Open and Indian Wells, but there's certainly a lot of room for improvement.
Do you think it's actually not necessarily connected purely with the Davis Cup? I think probably the fact that all the talk, maybe that was the turning point potentially, but all the talk was around, can he do the Grand Slam this year? Or even the Golden Slam with the Olympics as well. And obviously getting the knock at the start of the year. I mean, he's very good at kind of having perspective on this, but that was obviously a big goal for him. And then maybe that actually does change the course of your year and potentially makes motivation and motivating yourself a little bit more difficult than it has been previously, when you've already got that first slam under your belt and you want to add to it and keep going. I think maybe that's something that does change your perspective a little bit, because it's not going to plan in the same way that he probably would have hoped it would, or we were even predicting. I mean, I thought maybe he'd win them all this year. What do you think about that?
I do wonder if we set the expectation for Djokovic so high. As you say, we're literally talking about things that have very rarely been done, if at all, in tennis. And maybe that has got to him a little bit. I do think this is just like the second tournament of his season, and it needs to be taken into context. And we all know, write Djokovic off at your peril, because he has this incredible this incredible appetite to bounce back. But he's certainly in a low spot at the moment. And although I think it's it's fine to obviously pick up have defeats here and there and learn from them, I don't think we were expecting the defeats to be against like players as lowly ranked as Luca Nardi, who he's in the top 100 now, but they're not to rivals around him. These are matches that we would expect to be almost kind of foregone conclusions when when Novak Djokovic steps onto the court.
Yeah, I think it's the nature of who he lost to, really, and the stage of the tournament for me that's the most surprising. I mean, interesting stat as well. Over the last 12 months, players from Italy have got 5 wins over Djokovic, and players from other countries have got 4. So maybe he just doesn't like playing Italians at the moment. They seem to be doing quite well against him, although I'm
He's probably
a large
quite sick of them. Yeah.
number of those from Yannick Sinner.
It might even be 4 of them from Yannick Sinner, yeah.
Well, I think Musetti's got a win over Djokovic, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Musetti last year.
I wonder if there's going to be, a sort of weird opposite year for Djokovic. He hasn't won the Olympic gold. So maybe as the year goes on, if he's not having great success, he'll just think, well, actually, that's the one thing I do need to win that I haven't yet won. So I'll put all my efforts to the Olympics, perhaps. We might not see him pick up so much elsewhere, but perhaps he'll finally tick that off the list. That could be a blessing in disguise for him.
I mean, he has now dropped out of Miami. How did you both react to that? Because I wasn't sure if he was playing or not. Do you think that was a decision he made after his form in Indian Wells? Is he going to kind of come back onto and try and reassert himself with the with the clay season coming up, and he's just sort of calling it quits now on the Sunshine Double?
I personally was a bit surprised. I know that a lot of Djokovic fans weren't surprised by this. I thought that he would want to kind of put this behind him, and the fact that he did make the trip to the US showed his intention to play both tournaments. So that was a surprise to me, but he did cite sort of scheduling issues and balancing his personal life and his professional life as the reason for sort of pulling out of Miami. So I guess the next time we see him will be on the clay. And that does sort of link with what Kim has said around the Olympics. Obviously, that will be in Paris on the clay. Maybe it's all focus is now on the clay swing heading into Paris and the Olympics.
He might give someone else a chance at Wimbledon then. We'll see. But yeah, I imagine Monte Carlo would be the next stop, which is where he's based anyway. So my initial thought was, is there something physical going on as well? But I think it's probably more, what he said, just having that kind of that break. You've got to be more clever with the scheduling as you get older as well. So it's a judgment call, perhaps, with regards to Miami. Also, Djokovic hasn't played much, at Indian Wells or Miami, in several years because of all the COVID restrictions. So him performing badly at Indian Wells, he hasn't had great success here for quite a while, quite a number of years now, not just not playing, but I think the few years before then. So perhaps it's not the biggest surprise when you look at it in context. But let's look at the women's action from Indian Wells, because, again, another final that we have had before at Indian Wells in the desert. It was Iga Swiatek against Maria Sakkari. This was the final from 2022, so we had a repeat of that. And again, it went the same way with Iga Swiatek coming out on top. 6-4, 6-love. Again, Swiatek doing the business in impressive fashion in the final.
Another bagel.
Another bagel. The bakery is still selling selling products. She won the final 8 games of the match as well. So Sakkari just kind of fading as the match went on. Chris, Swiatek is our champion. Not a big surprise. Perhaps the surprising thing here is Maria Sakkari, who has turned up for the first time in a long while.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Iga result, Kim, we both predicted this. Joel, I think you maybe said Coco Gauff for this one. So
hey, it was looking good until the semi-finals.
I mean, one of Coco's earlier matches, I think it was against Burrell. I was watching that, and that looked anything but good. But she found a way, and it got
a lot of doubles.
Got a lot better from there. But the respectable prediction, I'd say then, Joel. Still, but with Iga, it just was. It was almost like the court was made for her. You know, it's a slow, hard court. The balls are pretty slow. They fluff up pretty quickly. If you've been following any of the players on social media who haven't been very pleased with the conditions, I think it worked really well for Alcaraz in the same way. But in the final, I mean, she is the final boss now, it would seem. Because Sakkari, you thought she really had put together a fantastic week. Now she's obviously broken up with her coach. Finally, and I will keep saying finally, because imagine if she had done this sooner. I really think some of the results would have been much better that she's had, because I'm not sure that relationship was as good professionally, maybe as it was kind of a not wanting to break up the personal relationship they had together of being very good friends. But it seems like now she's back on the right path and playing the tennis that we all know she can play against all these players. But then obviously when it comes to Iga, it's a completely different ball game, it would seem. I mean, she was just imperious this week, so it's hard to judge, Sakkari in terms of where she is in the game, because you just have a player who is playing by far the best tennis on the tour right now.
And Sakkari, she's recently split up from her old coach, Tom Hill, who she'd been with for, a while. She is now working with Jessica Pegula's former coach, David Witt. So obviously, I think we can credit a large part of her resurgence with this kind of, impetus from the new coach. Joel, this has been something we've been saying, I think, when we've discussed Sakkari for a while. Does it just prove to you what a good decision this has been from Sakkari with changing up her team?
I think so, and I think it looks like it's borne fruit earlier on. Similar to how Coco Gauff brought in, I think, Brad Gilbert in last season. I think just touching on what Chris said, I felt like the relationship she had with Tom Hill, it had come to an end, and it almost felt like maybe it was a bit more of an emotional decision of why maybe Tom Hill was kept on as long as he did, when maybe it wasn't actually the best tennis decision. And she felt that earlier in the year, she felt like, actually, I need to change things up now, and I do need to take the emotion out of it and make a tennis decision to further my career, because she really had come up at a crossroads, I felt. And the fact that she hadn't won anything since Guadalajara last season just shows that I think she was in a little bit of a rut. And watching her tennis this week, what I've been impressed most about has been when she has kind of lost a set where it's been tight, maybe she could have taken it, but she didn't. I think in those situations in the past, it's got away from her very, very quickly. But here, she's been able to kind of bounce back and take it in 3. The match, the semi-final against Coco Gauff, very tight tiebreak in that second set, which she lost, but she kept focused, she kept positive, and she was able to run away with that third set. I think, as I say, before, in kind of old Maria Sakkari, she would have got down in the dumps on herself. She would have been too negative, and it would have got away from her, and ultimately probably ended in a loss. So I've liked the more positive approach that she's been taking, and I think she's also been kind of very pragmatic, and she's spoken about keeping things simple. That's David Witt's kind of his kind of coaching approach, and I think that's very important for someone like Sakkari, who can get frustrated, particularly I think in the business ends of tournaments where the pressure gets up. We all know about her kind of semi-final record and how it's not that great, and I think maybe keeping things simple at the business end is working really well for her.
And I think one thing I'll say on that as well is that when it comes to, break point, and we will talk about that in the second half, but one of the most interesting interactions from that whole series was around when Tom Hill was preparing Sakkari for a match at the Australian Open. And he was saying about how amazing her forehand is with this girl that she's playing against. And Sakkari's like, oh, I'm playing another Serena Williams again, am I? Was almost her comment. And it makes you think, like, clearly the way that she responds better, and again, this could be too soon to say, but is when you make it simple and focus on what her strengths are and the things that she might forget, rather than focus on who you're playing. And a player like Jo Konta was like that, where she didn't even do like research. Other people might have watched some matches in her team, but she would go and play her game and focus on her side of the court. And I actually think that's probably a really healthy attitude for Sakkari to have, rather than to worry about all the external factors that could have an impact on the match.
Yeah, because you're almost going into the match then feeling inferior, lacking confidence if you're just focusing on the opponent's strengths, whereas actually think, well, what can I do? What can I control? And what am I good at? How do I assert myself? So just, yeah, it's that's kind of, I guess, that psychological impact as well. And I mean, the final itself, from 4-all in the first set, Swiatek really upped her game. She only lost 5 points in the second set. It didn't lose any games, obviously. And so for Sakkari, coming up against Swiatek in the final, it's disappointing that she couldn't get a better scoreline, get a set, even make more of an inroad. But, Swiatek on this court, she's just, played at another level, really. It was kind of perfect for her game, only losing 21 games over the 6 matches. And she, she's won this event, a couple of times now. She's got 8 1,000 event titles now. So just fantastic stats. Keep on building for Iga Swiatek.
I feel like the biggest contest that Swiatek had was Caroline Wozniacki in the quarterfinal, because Wozniacki kind of raced into her lead, and I was like, are we on for an upset here?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that when I saw the early scores, because I'd also seen rumours early in the week that Wozniacki had been seen limping around the grounds, and then she came out and beat Kerber. So clearly there was something that was going on there. So maybe she was testing her levels, seeing how she would go and kind of playing a bit more aggressively, because she knew she couldn't spend that much time on the court. And when she lost that first set, she knew she couldn't keep going much longer. But I mean, it's kind of a flex, right? Losing a set 6-4, and that's more games than pretty much anyone got. The same number of games that Sakkari got in the final, just in the one set again. So
I mean, that was to me the only sort of weakness maybe that Swiatek had over the last couple of weeks. Was she was a little bit of a slow starter in that match against Wozniacki. She was also a bit of a slow starter against Noskova, because I think Noskova raced into an early lead before Swiatek took it, quite comfortably in the end. So that maybe is one thing. And I when I was looking at the final, I was like, this is all going to hang on kind of how it started, and Swiatek not letting her opponent kind of start really well. And although Sakkari did come back into it in that first set, she just sort of went up a few levels and and steamrolled Sakkari in the end. It was pretty hard to watch. I feel like in that second set I was feeling a bit sorry for Sakkari, but just imperious stuff really from Swiatek.
Quite old school to have Wozniacki and Kerber, both in the draw, both having quite a good run. Chris, didn't you see them play that kind of Wozniacki retirement match back in the day? And yet,
I feel
here they both are.
I know, it's great to see them, but I still am asking for my refund, Caroline, because, I mean, you're back on the tour. Obviously, people can change their mind, but it was great to see that because they're great friends. They had a great time when they played here in Copenhagen in 2022, but I mean, it makes me think, like, who else are we going to see, come back on the tour and put some results together? Maybe Kvitova will return after she has her baby, and great to see the mums on the tour doing really well.
And just a couple of other bits from the women's draw. Aryna Sabalenka, she had a win over Emma Raducanu, actually, but lost promptly after to Emma Navarro in 3 sets. Navarro is now into the top 20. She's a player that's sort of gradually been making her way up the rankings, and has been seeded at over the last couple of months, but just really kind of stealthily come through without too much fanfare. I mean, one to certainly look out for in the draws, but also what's going on with Sabalenka, because she's really not had a great year after winning that Australian Open title, has she? She wouldn't be expecting to fall to Emma Navarro of all players. Joel, what do you think? What do you think's the story with Sabalenka here? And
I don't think these courts are very well suited to her. Chris spoke about the fact that they're slow. The ball kind of sits up. It's not a faster hard court, and that's that would be kind of prime conditions for Sabalenka. And that was sort of kind of stripped from her. And Navarro's a very feisty competitor, got a lovely backhand, and she put Sabalenka to the sword in 3 sets, and I was very impressed with her performance. And at the moment I'm always kind of thinking, is the American ladies' number 2 spot up for grabs? Because Coco Gauff for me is kind of like out in front, but Jessica Pegula's kind of gone a little bit, she's lost that consistency that kind of firmly put herself up there. And Navarro, to me, is in a prime position potentially to make, even a further rise up the rankings.
I'm also going to mention here, I think we had a mailbag question, which was, who are the players to watch out for? And I think I did say Emma Navarro a while ago, because I do think she was... I mean, please correct me, listeners, if I didn't, because maybe I've imagined myself getting this one right, but she was putting together some great results kind of in the lower levels of kind of the tour. And I think that's also something which we saw Bianca Andreescu do a lot when she was first coming up. And I think it gives you like a lot of kind of great sort of mental stamina when it comes to these matches, of making it difficult, getting the wins, sort of slugging out each week. And now she's starting to put the results together on the tour. I think she's a very difficult customer for someone like Sabalenka in terms of, the retrieval that she can do. And with Sabalenka, you do think that she's getting or letting herself get too frustrated too soon, because she did do that in the match with Raducanu as well. Like, her head dropped pretty quickly in a way at the Australian Open when it was coming easy to her, or more easily. She just coasted. And I think if you can make a match a bit difficult with her, a bit like how Coco Gauff was able to hang in there in New York, someone like Navarro can make it very difficult for you in a similar way to sort of Haddad Maia, where you've really got to beat them. And I think that's something where she needs to be a bit more, I'd say, a bit more like relaxed in those moments where it's not working, which I think we haven't seen her be this sort of out of sorts for a little while, that's for sure.
And let's take a quick break now, but do join us in the second half, where we'll be discussing Saudi Arabia's billion-dollar proposal for tennis, Netflix stopping production of Breakpoint, and all the news from Miami as Simona Halep returns to competition following her suspension. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast. And now we're going to move on to a little quiz section before we get into all of the news from the past week. I think we've got another Joel's Game. Is that right, Joel?
Yeah,
Excellent.
I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed it so much last week.
We've got
and I
to do
enjoyed...
better.
You've got, I feel like there is room for improvement. That is one of the reasons I've brought it back. But also I've enjoyed like hearing your kind of discussions as a team around the rankings and the players.
A bit like hearing coaches speak, Darren Cahill talking to Yannick Sinner. It's like, who's who in the situation?
So, yeah, Joel's Game is back. For listeners who haven't played Joel's Game before, this is effectively higher, lower, or same. I'm going to give a tennis player, and they're going to tell me if their career high ranking is higher, lower, or same than the previous player. And if you get 5 correct answers, you win Joel's Game. So there we go. That's the format. The player I'm going to start with this week is Fabrice Santoro. So there's no skin in the game just yet. But any ideas on a career high ranking for Fabrice Santoro?
That is a great question. I would say maybe number 7. I mean, I really don't know. I'm so bad at this game.
As high as 7. I was going to say maybe more like 14.
Okay, so
it's hard.
Let's go 14.
Chris, your radar is completely off. Kim, you are much, much closer. His career high was 17.
Oh, that's
Well
not
done.
often we say that Chris's tennis radar is off.
I think Joel
I'll
likes
take
this
that
game
as a
so
small
much.
win.
I do. I
Because I'm
love
so
seeing,
bad at it. Yeah,
I love seeing Chris squirm a little bit with some of these. Right, okay, so that is your starting point. Career high 17 for Fabrice Santoro. The next player I'm going to give you is Jürgen Melzer. So Jürgen Melzer, career high ranking, higher, lower, or same than 17?
Well, I think
Higher?
Wait, I want to say
Surely.
7 again. I'm surely it's higher. I'll go 7 again
Yeah.
from me. But what do you think, Kim?
Well,
do you
I
think
think
top 10?
I think, I don't know about as high as 7, but I'd think maybe 8 or 9. I know there's only like 1 or 2 different.
One
but
difference.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
Kim. Right,
certainly
we'll go
higher.
with you. We'll go 8 then.
Splitting hairs.
So higher?
We're going
Yeah.
to say higher. Number 8 is what we think.
That is correct. It is higher. And actually, it is. You were bang on. Career high number 8.
Well done, Kim.
Oh, 2 in a row
honestly, I'm going to
almost.
stop talking. I'm stopping.
Okay, so you've got 1 correct answer. The next player I'm going to give you is Ivo Karlovic.
Surely lower. About 20, I'd say.
I think he's been higher than that, but I don't.
Oh, really?
I don't. Well, I think he might have knocked on the door of the top 10, but I think he'll be lower than 8. So definitely, I think lower is the answer. I'm not. Maybe about
Something in the teens,
16,
we think lower.
17.
Yes.
Yeah, but lower, please, Joel.
That is correct. Yes, Ivo Karlovic, career high 14
Oh.
Honestly.
in the world.
Well done. This is better than last week already,
So-
Kim.
so-
You're really carrying us.
So 2 correct answers. Getting closer. Okay, the next player I'm going to give you is Dmitry Tursunov. Emma Raducanu's one-time coach, Dmitry Tursunov, career high ranking, higher, lower, or same than 14.
I think
this is hard.
slightly lower, personally.
I think slightly lower as well. I'm not sure
I
you're
feel
having
like-
big standout.
Yeah.
He loved an
I think
upset,
it'd be like
but I'm
in
not sure.
In the 20s. He's definitely been seeded, hasn't he, at slams, but
He might have broken
would
top
say-
20, but I'd say probably low 20s.
yeah. So it's definitely
So we're saying
lower,
lower,
Joel.
yes.
please. Yeah.
Lower?
Yes.
I'd say about 23 maybe even for his ranking, but
That is correct, yes. Dmitry Tursunov, career high 20 in the world. So that is 3 correct answers. Are you ready for your next player?
yes, please.
Max Murny. Max
Oh.
Murny, a singles and doubles player, but I'm looking for his singles career high ranking. Higher, lower, or same than 20.
These are real blasts from the past, aren't they?
These are, yeah, this is, I mean, in doubles, definitely. In singles, maybe. It's going to be
It could be-
pretty close.
Could be the same. What do you
I think it's pretty close. If I had to say, maybe slightly higher, but I don't know. Joel never does the same. I think he thinks we like to think he will. I think he plays mind games with me. You're cool, Kim. I'm not sure. I'd say slightly higher, but I'm not sure.
Oh, my gut is... Yeah, I mean, he could have been 18 or 19, like, just.
That's what I think. I don't think
I'm
he's top
happy
15.
to go higher, because if not, it would be, like, the same. But...
And I
I'm
don't
gonna
think Joel
push
likes
you.
to... Okay,
I'm
we'll
yeah,
gonna
say
okay,
push
higher.
you.
higher. Let's go higher,
This
but
is-
not by
I'm a bit
much.
nervous. Yeah.
That is correct, yes.
Oh, well done,
Max
Chris.
Murny, career high 18.
Kim, you
were
got it as
very,
well.
very, very good. Yes. Right. This is unfounded territory because you could complete Joel's game, I think, for the first ever time if you get this correct. So, we have Max Murny, career high 18. The final player to win Joel's game for the first time is Jarkko Nieminen.
Of course it is.
Higher, lower, or same than 18 career high ranking?
That is not
It's
easy.
tricky. I think it might be slightly lower, like 19, like really close, but just
I
fractionally lower.
really do not know. He was handy,
He's
but did he...
definitely,
I think it's probably in the teens, but did he make... Yeah, I think he made top 20, but did he... I don't think he went higher than 18. What do you think?
So it could be Joel throwing in a same, or is
Shall
he
we
bluffing on
go...
that?
Every
I'm
time
going
we've
to
gone
push
same,
you.
he said
I'm
no.
going to push
sorry.
you. I need an answer.
Okay, should we say lower, but just slightly?
Lower, just slightly.
Lower, okay.
Lower?
Not that there's actually different scales of lower, but we'll say
Is
lower.
that your final answer?
I think it
Yes.
is. Yeah.
For the million.
That is incorrect.
Oh no,
Darko
sorry.
Nieminen has gone higher. His career high ranking is 13.
Really?
So
Oh,
quite a few
dear.
places above.
Did he make a Masters
I'm so
final? I feel like
sorry.
he might have once, actually.
So there you go. Well, I always remember him for that match against Roger Federer at Wimbledon. But there you go. You were so close, yet so far from completing Joel's game.
Thanks for
Listeners,
that.
did any of you manage to complete it? If so, let us know if you got the whole set.
Surely no one got Jarkko Nieminen today. That's a tricky one. But our Finnish listeners might have.
I remember him playing Tim Henman a lot at Wimbledon and having some good five-setters. That's my primary memory of Jarkko Nieminen.
Did he play in
but-
glasses? Did I make that up? Did he play in glasses?
I don't. Did he?
Maybe. I think I made that up.
maybe?
I've just made that up.
Not,
I think
he's not Dennis
sometimes.
Istomin.
No.
Yeah. Can we say same for that answer? Yeah.
Right. But yeah, listeners, let us know how you got on. Thank you, Joel. That was fun. And we definitely learned something new. Let's dip into the mailbag for this week because Nicola has got in touch with us on email and asked us, "Hi Tennis Weekly, with the news that Netflix has ceased production of Breakpoint after just 2 seasons, what do you think went wrong with the show?" So yeah, we did have the sad news. Or some people may not think it's sad news, but the news that Breakpoint is finishing. It's not going to be any more seasons. Which is, they obviously have their reasons based on the ratings and the success and the cost of it all. But if we had to pick, why it's not continuing, what do you guys think is the issue? As Nicola's asking. Chris, I'm coming to you first.
I think it's to do with access and the stories that they chose to focus on. I think a lot of the top players aren't giving access, and that's where the best stories are. I think Drive to Survive, which was also done by the same production company for Netflix, it has all the big players in it, or it definitely used to. At certain times they appear, and it feels like a very natural storytelling around races and key events. And I think you have to paint more of a picture with the tennis side of things, and they haven't necessarily got the cast that you would want or focused on the right way, because if you really want it to work, the players have to really feature you. So the players would have to let you in to all of the things they're doing. And it seems like the only person from last series who gave all access was Zverev, who was completely the wrong person to be focusing your attention on, given the allegations that there are surrounding him that they did not mention, and then dedicating very short amounts of time to Carlos Alcaraz and also Coco Gauff in comparison, which arguably were the stories of last year. So it doesn't work if it's not telling the story of what's happening on the tour, and it doesn't work if you don't have the players that people want to see on that to have their stories be told.
And Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think player access has been a big thing, and it was interesting to see this week because there's going to be a Carlos Alcaraz specific docuseries kind of coming out on Netflix, and I think that was really kind of what has, I think, held back Breakpoint from being a success, was having those top level players give access. And I think it can be done in the right way, but perhaps for tennis it needs to be more player focused. It needs to have the big names brought in, because I think it can be a success. We saw with the Netflix Sam, for example, from what I've been reading, the ratings for that have been very, very good, have been very, very strong. But with something like Breakpoint, you need, I think, a whole host of characters that people can get invested in, and you want to start at the top there. And it didn't feel like we started there. We sort of started in the middle and went down, and we didn't get as much access perhaps as we would have liked to. And as a result, it just felt a little bit maybe a bit superficial and not essential, whereas
A bit irrelevant, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A bit kind of like on the side, whereas
Peripheral.
with Drive to Survive, it felt like it almost added, I think, to the action versus Breakpoint, where it felt a little bit, on the periphery.
Yeah, and I also thought one thing I thought was quite funny was Casper Ruud was asked about this, who obviously appeared in some of season 1 and season 2. And he said he didn't watch it, and that he didn't really feel like the guys that made it impressed him with the show. He didn't think it was a great show in the end. And he said you kind of have to invite people if you want more screen time, and that's just not how he is. He's not going to invite them during Roland Garros for 3 hours of filming when he could be hanging out with, you know, your family or doing things that you like or focusing on the tennis. So I think he said in this statement that he wishes it focused more on the real results and matches. And I think that's kind of exactly what you've said. It adds to it when you look at some of the incredible results of F1 or even the Tour de France edition, whereas this, it feels like they're looking for narratives they can weave in with the limited access they sometimes have.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And I think there's more action on the actual court itself than what they necessarily added. Whereas, I mean, arguably, sometimes with Drive to Survive, we do see Formula One races that are pretty boring, and that's, you know, it's quite we know who's going to win. It's quite processional. So watching the Drive to Survive actually sometimes can add that drama that sometimes can be missing, whereas I don't think Breakpoint achieved that in the same way. But I did overall enjoy it. So I
liked that some of the mental side of things that was really interesting, right, Kim? There was some interesting dynamics of the fact that people lose every week. You don't think about it that way, and I think there's definitely an interesting story to be told. It's a shame that it's coming to an end, but maybe Alcaraz, the documentary, will be great, and maybe even better one, we'll get Sinner as the title.
Wow.
Born Sinner, it could be, you know.
Oh,
Born a
I like
Sinner.
that.
well, there's already been a detective.
Sinner to winner.
Sinner to winner.
There is
you
a
go,
detective
Kim.
thing called
That's
the
the
Sinner.
advertising mouse I have.
And also in the news this week is Saudi Arabia and their continued investment into tennis. We have had rumours that they are proposing a large sum of money, $2 billion, to invest into the ATP and the WTA. This is currently just at the rumour stage, so we don't have anything definite. But it's, you know, would potentially result in quite a lot of structural change to the tours and the calendar. There's also the offer for possibly a premium tour as part of this, perhaps. But Chris, coming to you first, we spoke about this last week, not this specific proposal, but just Saudi Arabia generally investing in the sport with the PIF, the Public Investment Fund. $1 billion to perhaps each of the tours. That's a vast sum of money. Are they going to be able to, you know, turn this away because it is such a big amount? You know, assuming this is, you know, what we're having, this news that's coming out is correct. Where do you think this leaves the ATP and the WTA?
Well, I'll tell you what, things escalated because beforehand we thought this was the soft launch by seeing
I know.
sort of PIF but behind the courts, and it was a strategic partnership, and now they're just why not fast track it would seem. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about a lot of money on the table, and I think it's hard to say no to that money, especially if it is the same for the WTA and the ATP. It is kind of what we're talking about, that we want there to be this unity to make sure that they're able to kind of also up their game and benefit in this way. But I do think that then this does leave the ATP and WTA in a very strange position. And I also think it would therefore mean that tennis would be under Saudi control. It would become a Saudi sport, essentially. But again, it is the rumour mill. One thing that is for certain proposed would be there would be a Masters 1000 event at the first week of the season, is what they're saying. And that would be for both of the WTA and ATP. So that's something that would be slightly softer of an investment of a Masters 1000 as opposed to completely taking over. I'm not sure what you think, Joel, but I think you and Craig Tiley probably share some similar opinions on this.
I mean, I was going to say as well, you know, we had like sort of dipping the toe in the water with all this talk of strategic partnership with the ATP, and now we've just kind of go fully sort of immerse my whole body in the water with this offer.
Taking a cold dip.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's come
plunge.
so quickly, and I think it's caught, you know, a lot of tennis fans off guard in terms of, we probably maybe felt it was inevitable at some point, some sort of offer was going to be made. But the fact that it's already been put on the table, and interestingly, it's only going to be available for 90 days. I don't know how, you know, these kind of talks and all the stakeholders and all of that, whether that's an appropriate amount of time. But yeah, it's very surprising, and it just feels at the moment that just tennis as a whole, there's just a massive power struggle going on, and you've got this, you've got on one side you've got this power of Saudi Arabia, all the wealth that want to come in and maybe do what they've done to golf, to tennis. But then also, it's not going to be to everyone's benefit. And Chris, as you said, to have a Masters 1000 event potentially at the start of the year, at the start of the season, that is not going to sit well with Tennis in Australia and Craig Tiley, who are going to feel like, their territory is being encroached on, and, tennis in Australia will be marginalised for potentially like a Saudi Arabian swing right at the start of the season that maybe goes into the Australian Open. So it just feels very kind of confusing at the moment. There's lots of kind of stakeholders and things at play, and there's another offer on the table as well around a premium tour, which feels a bit more kind of like got the players in mind, feels like very like player centric, but it's hard to refuse like the eye-watering sums of money, particularly if you are the WTA, like, given their business and how it's been run. That's it's not going away, and this is going to be that moment where they're going to have to figure it out, and we'll have to see if what comes of it.
And if you're a player, and this is what Kim said last time, if you're a female player and you are after making as much as the men do, and that's obviously what we all want, is equality in pay. I mean, this is something, as you say, that puts a very difficult position from the WTA as an organisation, that it's almost kind of a buyout in some ways of the WTA, and it would completely overhaul for both tours the experience that people currently have of it being, there's a flow that happens each season that we're all very familiar with. But when you look at the exhibitions that happen outside of the tour, and players are increasingly prioritising them over their pre-season, I think we all knew this would be happening, that money talks when it comes to these sorts of events. But I don't think we'd thought it would happen at this sort of pace. And I think that's the thing that's really surprising, that in 3 months it could be announced that the PIF is going to be taking over a vast majority of the tour. And that could really shift what we know as tennis, which is not something that I, for one, I'm not for it at all. But I say, Kim, we start the crowdfunder now, see how much we can get together on Tennis Weekly.
We need to put an offer together, because it feels like it's open. Yeah, the Tennis Weekly
tennis?
offer.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Listeners, please chip in. We've asked for one recently, but it's time.
We might be laughed out of the room. I mean, it is quite hard to keep up with all of the kind of business and financial negotiations that exist in the world of tennis. It can be quite complicated, because, like you said, Joel, there's also this offer of a premium tour, which is kind of separate, I think. When we talk about premium tour, there's been speculation about this as well, with various stakeholders meeting to kind of talk about, this sort of elite level tour, which would include the 4 Grand Slams, 10 Masters 1000 events, a team competition, and a combined season-ending championships. That would then mean that 500 events and lower would be part of what could be called a contender tour. I mean, again, that's a complete restructure, really, and a lot of consultations are going to need to be done. It's not something that can or should happen quickly, really, because there's a lot to consider.
I mean, this to me is this has been the brainchild, I think, of Craig Tiley and Tennis Australia, almost, I think, as a riposte to this Saudi Arabia offer, because I think they are feeling that they're the most vulnerable in terms of, well, if Saudi Arabia are making their mark, how does that look on the tennis calendar? Well, it sounds like it might marginalise Tennis Australia events. Now, the one thing that I think is quite interesting with the Saudi Arabia offer is that it does not include the 4 Grand Slams. They are running still as kind of the separate entities. They are technically not part of the tour. But I think this premium tour offer is kind of like, has players' welfare a lot more in mind, and rather than almost kind of expanding it, they're kind of doubling down on the events that are, the highest profile. I'd say it's more inclusive. The Grand Slams are in there. The Masters events are in there. And you've got this, I think you've got, Saudi Arabia, which is looking to expand and be maybe as big as possible. But this premium tour, I think, to me, is a bit more concentrated and focused on the events that sell. And if you're not part of, and it's like, it's great if you're part of that, but if you're not, then you're sort of left out on the fringes. And I think the idea of it being split with a contender tour, that's the bit I think that I'm a little bit nervous about, because you might create inequalities between, being on one tour versus being on another, which I think you sort of have at the moment, in a different guise with,
pay disparity, for example.
with like the ATP tour versus the Challenger circuit.
Yeah, and I think whatever way you look at it, everything is scaling up. It's all about the bigger events, bigger and better, which is obviously not the nature of Challenger events, 250s and 500s necessarily. So I think it's definitely shifting, and I think the 250 will be not necessarily like a thing of the past with these plans, but I think there would have to still be considerable amounts of money on offer to make them worthwhile.
And I mean, yet another change that might be happening next year. We've also had news that there might be a women's tournament at the Queen's Club. So going to grass courts, going pre-Wimbledon now, thinking about tennis in the UK, the Queen's Club may well be holding a WTA tournament, which will be the week after the French Open, and it will be the week before the men's tournament that is currently, in place there. So these are kind of, again, we don't have definites, but it's kind of potentially on track. This would replace Eastbourne as the kind of bigger women's grass court event in the UK before Wimbledon. It would mean that Eastbourne would have to be downgraded, I guess, to a 250. I'm quite sad by this news that it might impact Eastbourne in that way, because I love the Eastbourne tournament, but I think also bringing women to London and having something at Queen's on the same kind of level as the men would be great. So I'm in two minds about this. Joel, you often pop over to Queen's to get a bit of the tennis there. Do you welcome this news?
I like the idea of a women's event at Queen's. I love the idea of opening up tennis, and think this would be a step in the right direction. I do have concerns over the fact that that's going to be an enormous strain on Queen's Club and the grass court. So that's 2 weeks of tennis. I'd be curious to know what like the men's final after 2 weeks of tennis would look like in terms of the courts. So I think there is kind of maybe logistical and practical things I'm a little bit more nervous about, but I think in principle I would be happy with this sort of mood. I get that there's going to be winners and losers, and it would look like that Eastbourne would be a loser to it, but I think for me I think this would be nice move, particularly in the build up to Wimbledon, given the locality to London as well.
I think for me it's a little bit of a shame, because I think Eastbourne does have so much heritage in terms of British tennis and women's tennis. I think it is significant because obviously it's a 500 for the women, it's a 250 for the men, and I think whatever way you put it, in separate weeks the women will be at a disadvantage if they're playing the week after the French Open, so it won't have the same sort of lineup as a 500. So I think that's what I like about Eastbourne, is that it feels like you build up a little bit towards the Eastbourne tournament happening, and it is that place where all of the best kind of women in the world do want to potentially play there if they're not playing in Germany, for example. So I think that is a bit of a shame. I think if we were to lose a Nottingham or a Birmingham, I think that wouldn't be as sad to me, because I do think it's not realistic for players to play every single week. But obviously when it comes to British tennis, we want to see as much grass as we can. So I'm a bit torn on that, but
I mean, the fact with Queen's as a women's event, if it is a 500 in the first week after the French Open, is there a nervousness potentially around what top level players might you get at that tournament? The very first week after Roland Garros, assuming let's say all the top players do really well, like that's a big transition in terms of court surface. And Chris, before we started recording, you were sort of wondering about the fact that 500s first week after Grand Slams doesn't necessarily feel quite right, does it?
It doesn't. But then, Kim, didn't Queen's used to be the week after the French for a while, and Nadal used to play it? Yeah.
Yeah. Nadal used to, Rafa, it sounds weird saying his formal name. He used to get on the Eurostar to go straight to Queen's, and it was quite exciting. Be waiting at Queen's for him to turn up. Having
waiting at the Eurostar. I thought you were going to say
no at Queen's. Well, I'm sure some fans did. But yeah, it's so. But even then,
It's
that
possible.
was such an intense transition though for the body to go straight from one to the other. And I think he did that when he was younger. He certainly wouldn't do it now. So really, how many top players are you going to get? So we'll have to wait and see what is decided, because we don't know how this will also affect Nottingham and Birmingham. But it's going to be interesting. There'll be some change. This year it will still be the same. So we'll enjoy Eastbourne as a 500. Maybe the last time.
I'm going this year. I need to.
But talking about going, I've got to dash off now. We are recording this in two halves because of the Miami draws, which we will have in a bit. So I'm going to leave our listeners in your capable hands to talk through our women's and men's draws for Miami. So see you guys next week when we're chatting all things Miami. But over to you, Chris and Joel.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, the Miami draw preview is going to be with me and Chris. I'm going to be assuming the Kim position, and we're going to be chatting about the men's and women's draws for the Miami Open, as well as delivering our predictions. We will say now, listeners, we have absolutely not tampered with Kim's predictions. She has sent them in, but we definitely have not tampered with them. We have not put Rafael Nadal as champion in the men's draw. We've done nothing like that, have we, Chris?
We have tried very hard not to, although I would say I'm quite good at imitating Kim when it comes to predictions now. I think we've actually had to try not to pick the same as Kim for this, because she does do so well at the predictions normally.
I honestly think I'm like, there's some sort of kindred spirit, wavelength, psycho
forces at work.
Yeah, there's something going on there, because I swear we just end up with very similar predictions. However,
it's because we talk about tennis every week with each other.
I know it
probably.
is. But I do want to say now, I think my women's predictions are going to raise some eyebrows when we get onto them.
Are you finally going outside of the form book?
I am going. It's been a hard journey, but I've reached a point where I've considered players that aren't seeded to go deep.
Okay, that's quite the teaser. Is it Simona Halep by any chance?
Yes, it is Simona Halep, exactly. Well, we'll wait and see. We're going to be unveiling our predictions in a bit. But yeah, let's talk. Well, let's start with the women's draw, actually, and let's talk about Simona Halep, because as much as I want to talk about the top seed and Iga Swiatek's going to be there, Rybakina, is she even going to play? Not sure. She dropped out of Indian Wells. I want to start with Simona Halep, because the last time, Chris, we spoke about her was she was free to play tennis again, and it was like the question was moving on to, okay, when is she going to come back to the tour? Were we expecting her to come back this quickly?
No, I mean, I certainly wasn't. I think I'd just seen a quote from her saying that she had been pretty religiously hitting, keeping herself very positive until that verdict, which was released last September. And then she said she stopped practicing for a bit. So I don't know if she picked it up. I'd say obviously I have not seen her play a match yet. I've seen her hit, and I think she does look like she could do with, a bit more time in the gym. She looks a bit leaner than she was before. So I think maybe she just thought, I've wasted all this time. I want to get back on the court. I want to see where my level is. And I think she's probably testing where she is rather than expecting big things from the first match.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what also is going to be interesting is the crowd reaction and the fan reaction when she does step out on the court. What do you think? I mean, she's got Paula Badosa in the first round. Do you see that? Is that match going to be on a stadium court, or where do you see that match being played? And what do you think the reaction do you think will be from fans who are spectators on that day?
Well, there'll definitely be a lot of interest in that match. So I think that's probably quite an interesting prospect from a TV audience perspective. I think more TV audience than fans in the actual grounds, I think, potentially. But I think, like most players coming back, like a Sharapova coming back, I think it's very similar. I think tennis is always pleased to have a name that people know. She's a name that people knew before, obviously, she did get the ban. So I think people like to see people they know. So I'm sure she'll be welcomed with open arms. And definitely considering the fact she was given the wild card without question, Miami want to make a point. They're supporting her comeback.
And this year, we don't have the defending champion, Petra Kvitova, who is pregnant and off the tour. Elena Rybakina was the player she defeated in the final, and there's still a few question marks on her participation as well.
Yeah, I mean, she pulled out of Indian Wells recently. It's one of a number of times she's pulled out due to kind of gastrointestinal issues. So it's hard to know where she'll be at and how she'll be feeling. So are you brave enough to predict a deep run for Rybakina, an unknown quantity that she is?
I feel like you've had a sneak peek at my predictions, but Rybakina may feature because I just don't think you can count her out, and I think she'll be itching to get back on the court. I'm just hoping, say, dropping out of Indian Wells was more precautionary than anything. However, as I say, let's wait and see. I mean, in terms of some other round one matchups, we've got some very tasty ones. Sloane Stephens versus Angie Kerber, I'm looking at. Osaka versus Cocciaretto as well. And we've got Emma Raducanu in round one against Wong of China. And a wildcard for Venus Williams.
Well, I mean, everything to talk about, but that was a rematch from the Australian Open of that epic that Emma Raducanu played. So I think that will be very interesting to watch. And I mean, Venus Williams, she might have some chances in her first match, but she is playing the big hitting Diana Schneider. So that's someone who I think will probably be a step too far for Venus. But in my mind, if Venus is on a tennis court, good for her.
I mean, let's do some predictions because I'm quite curious to hear what your quarter by quarter predictions are. Let's go through quarter by quarter. I will start. Who wants to give Kim's predictions?
I'll do Kim's women's predictions. I'll kick that off.
Okay, so what are we going with? Quarter one.
So for quarter one, Kim has gone for Swiatek versus Paolini. I've gone for Swiatek versus Navarro.
And I have gone Noskova versus Jessie Pegula.
Noskova! You've got Iga out to Noskova.
I'm going back to that Australian Open victory that Noskova had, and she was up. She was up on Swiatek in Indian Wells, and
how did that one end, though? How did it end?
I know it did end in a bagel in the end, but I'm going to go for a Swiatek off day, and I'm backing Noskova JPEG in my.
I would say you're very brave because you'll feel the wrath of our Twitter and Instagram followers for this sort of prediction.
I know exactly, and I can't wait for it. Right, quarter two.
I've gone for Goff Kasatkina. And Kim's gone for a completely different pair. She's gone for Kostyuk Potapova.
Okay. I mean, Marta Kostyuk's in great form at the moment. Great touch.
She had a
very good tournament in Indian Wells. I've gone for Elina Svitolina versus Kasatkina. So,
God, we've got a lot of names already out there.
I know. We are flexing our muscles, aren't we? Right. Quarter three.
Well, Kim and I have gone for exactly the same. We've both gone for Sakkari Mertens. So I think she's made a fantastic prediction.
I've gone Sakkari Rybakina. So yeah, I'm going to be backing Rybakina to make a dent in this tournament like she did last year.
And then this is where I think Kim loses us slightly. And Kim, if you're listening, I normally respect you greatly when it comes to predictions, but she's gone for Zheng Kalinina.
Interesting.
Wasn't expecting that. I've backing the Brits. I went for Bulta Sabalenka. Hopefully that'll be a repeat of that Wimbledon clash that was so entertaining.
Yeah, I was there for that.
We both were.
I'm also gone Bulta Sabalenka. I think Sabalenka will come good at this tournament. But yeah, I'm expecting a good showing from Bulta because she had such a great, pre-Sunshine Double kind of build up, and then
she did Dan Evans, didn't she?
Yeah, and then she lost to Camilla Giorgi in round one of Indian Wells, and was
very quick turnaround though.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully a bit more kind of lead up time, she can go a lot further.
Exactly. Well, are we on to the semi-finals?
Yep, semi-finals. What have you and Kim got?
Well, we have both gone for a player that you didn't go for, which is Swiatek, unsurprisingly, and she's backing Kostyuk to make it to the semis, and I've gone for Goff.
Okay. I mean, this sounds incredibly rogue now that I'm reading it aloud. Noskova Svitolina.
Right, okay. I mean, I did have Svitolina to win the Australian Open, so I can give you some sympathy
I'm
there.
going very punchy here.
Yeah, you really dialed up the fun here. I mean, I feel like maybe when you have two big tournaments in a row, the second one you just go completely rogue with.
You can tell I'm on leave this week. Everything's gone out the window, and I'm on holiday, and my predictions are on holiday as well.
Well, what did you get for the second semi-final and then the final and winner?
Well, my second semi-final is actually a little bit more conservative. Rybakina Sabalenka is my bottom half semi-final. And I've got a Svitolina Sabalenka final.
And who's winning that one?
I've got Sabalenka. I think Sabalenka's going to come good.
This is the return to form.
The return to form, exactly. So that's who I've got as my champion at the end of Miami. What about you and Kim?
Kim's gone for Sakkari Kalinina. Interesting. And then she's gone for Swiatek Kalinina in the final. So Kalinina's second 1,000 final. And she's got Iga winning that, unsurprisingly. I have got quite similar. I have a similar sort of lineup in Sakkari Sabalenka. And then I've got Swiatek Sabalenka in the final. And I think Iga's going to get it again. I think I can't go against the form book right now because that was as dominant a display as I've ever seen on a women's tournament.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But I'm sort of backing an upset. I mean, it is a very hard, it's an impressive thing to do to win the Sunshine Double, Indian Wells, and then Miami.
She'll want it though, won't she? She loves that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, interesting. You've both got Swiatek just to carry on the form that she's got in Indian Wells.
I thought you'd have Noskova winning by the way it was going.
I know. I'm a big Noskova fan over the next 2 weeks. But yes, we shall see on the women's side. But let's move on to the men's side because Daniil Medvedev is the defending champion here. And again, lots of tasty matchups in the draw. I mean, Chris, where was your eyes going to when the draw came out a few hours ago?
Well, I mean, I've actually been looking at, obviously, Andy Murray. He's got a very tasty clash against Berrettini, who recently made the final over at the Phoenix Challenger. So that's got my eye. But you actually alerted me to the fact that we have a very popular fan favourite who's returning to competition.
Yeah, Kei Nishikori's got a wild card into Miami, which that flew under the radar to me. I didn't realise that. So yeah, we've got quite a lot of old school players in the draw, and Nishikori. I mean, he does love an American hardcourt, but it's hard to know. It's hard to know what to expect from him nowadays, I feel.
Well, I think he last played in the summer of last year. And that was, I mean, that's quite a while ago now when you look at it. And he had a decent run at a couple of tournaments, but it's going to be a long path back to the top. But, Novak Djokovic is pushing 37. And Nishikori is at the tender young age of 34. So maybe there's still time for one more comeback there.
Exactly. And I mean, talking about Daniil Medvedev, defending champion, got to the final in Indian Wells. I mean, based on looking at his draw, do you see him being able to defend his title?
It's actually quite a tough draw. I was looking at it and, I mean, he doesn't really get any easy rounds. He's got a potential, I think, Purcell second round. He also has the potential for, I think it's Norrie, as well as Fritz and Ruud, and it's all go, I think. So he's got a tough section of the draw.
Humbert as well.
Humbert as well, yes, exactly. So, I mean, he's not dodging bullets there. He's going to have to take everyone on to defend his title. But, I mean, he did play some fantastic tennis. It was only really one set he dropped away in. So, will he get his hands on a trophy this year?
Yeah, well, we'll see. And I mean, just before we unveil our men's predictions, Carlos Alcaraz is the top seed because Novak Djokovic withdrew.
Nadal is not in the draw. We should also make clear,
and Nadal
just in case.
Nadal is not in the draw as well. I mean, what do you make of Carlos Alcaraz's path? I mean, you talked about the turnover from Indian Wells to Miami. Is there going to be any sort of, hangover or residue from, his exertions in Indian Wells, or do you think he can continue his form as well?
I think he's back, to be honest. I think he said he found himself again at Indian Wells in that tournament. So I do think that for him to drop his level significantly after that, I think will be quite unlikely. That's what I'm hoping. I'm really hoping that he's able to kind of produce something that he's capable of once again, and that this is back to the Carlos Alcaraz that we know. So he's got a pretty decent draw, I'd say. And I mean, if he's playing the way he did last week, I think it doesn't really matter what the draw is like. It's highly likely that he's going to put in a good showing.
I mean, we could potentially get Carlos Alcaraz versus Gael Monfils in round 3, and that would be a real
very tasty,
real crowd pleaser. I feel Gael Monfils is playing some of the best tennis, I think. At the moment, he seems to be blossoming, I think, a lot more than other players around his age, maybe even like Andy Murray. He seems to be doing a bit better, it feels like.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it will be it'll be good to see how he can kind of continue to improve. And when you have someone who's as entertaining as that to watch, you just hope they keep playing.
Right, let's get down to business. Predictions time for the Miami Open men's draw. What have you got for quarter one?
I've gone for Alcaraz, unsurprisingly, and Dimitrov. I have indeed.
Kim?
Kim has gone for Alcaraz and Korda. She loves a bit of Korda.
I've gone Alcaraz, Hubert Hurkacz.
Gone with the seedings, have you?
Yeah, I know. That was a bit more boring, but yeah, gone with the seedings there. Quarter two?
It's a tough section, this one. I really struggled to know who to pick. I didn't want to pick Zverev, so I was left with a few tricky choices there. So
I don't think the Bees picked him either.
No, they didn't. He was their last choice after Spider-Cam, Mohamed Liani, and Carlos Alcaraz. I went for FFA, Felix Auger-Aliassime. I think surely it's time that he starts to pick it up again, and I think the hard courts of Miami could do well for him. And then it was very tough. I was tossing up between Alex de Minaur, Rune, Lehechka. It's a very good section there, and I went for Rune because I think he's showing some promise again. Mm-hmm. But Kim completely disagrees with me. She went for Zverev and ADM. So what did you go for, Joel?
I went Zverev as well, but I did go for Lehechka. I think Lehechka has been playing some
really
very good tennis at the moment. Very dangerous entity on tennis court. Very capable of upsets. So yeah, I'm going Zverev, Lehechka. Quarter three.
So I know what you'd have gone for because this is Fritz's quarter. But I went
Absolutely.
I went for Ruud Medvedev. I think that will be likely to happen. I think Kasper's putting it together again on the hard courts. And then Kim went for Fritz Medvedev. So this was that sort of energy that she I think got from me somehow telepathically, because I also went for Fritz versus Medvedev. You've got a few matches, haven't you, this time?
What about quarter four? This is Yannick Sinner's quarter.
Yeah, we both went for Bublik Sinner. I'm not sure how we did that.
So you've got the telepathic energy going on.
We have
okay,
combined, exactly.
Right, so Bublik Sinner. I've got Rublev Sinner. So
okay,
I feel like that's quite a common quarter. I also say I just always see Rublev as very consistent at getting to quarterfinals. So yeah, I've gone Rublev Sinner. Right, semi-finals.
Kim has got Alcaraz Zverev and then Medvedev Sinner. I have Alcaraz Rune, Medvedev Sinner.
And I've gone Alcaraz Lehechka, Medvedev Sinner. And my final is Alcaraz Sinner.
And who wins it?
I'm going Sinner. I think he's going to
get his revenge.
He's going to get his revenge in the second half of the Sunshine Double, and they're going to be like 1-1 in across this month. And
then they'll split Rome and Madrid, and then we'll keep going throughout the year.
Yeah, they're just going to split. But I think Sinner will come back, and I've got Sinner as my Miami Open champion.
Well, we've all gone for Alcaraz Sinner in the final, and I can tell you, I'm the only one who went for Alcaraz.
Ooh.
I do think the courts in Indian Wells do suit him better, but I just thought, I've given him a hard time. I said maybe he was going to drop out of the top 10 at the end of the year with the injury he had in Rio and all of that I've confessed to earlier in the podcast. But I think now I've got to back him. He's back to business, and I think he's going to get his Miami crown.
Okay, well, there you go. We'll have to see. But yeah, interesting. We've all got Alcaraz Sinner in the final, but different outcomes. I am convinced, by the way, if there is a sequel to the Netflix Slam, the next high-profile match surely has to be Alcaraz Sinner. It's just box office. It's just box office.
Definitely, yes. Unless you can convince a Djokovic to play.
Yeah. Possibly. Well, yeah. Anyway, we're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, Miami Open just around the corner. We're going to end our episode there, though. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X. And the handle for all of those is Tennis Weekly Pod. You can purchase our delightful Tennis Weekly merch at etsy.com/shop/tennisweeklypodcast. You can email the show, tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, or you can check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on the 1st of April at Tennis Weekly HQ, so I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim, it's goodbye from Chris,
Goodbye.
and it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.